Hey guys, tonight we wander into a world awash with aromas you never knew could linger beyond death. Imagine drifting on warm desert winds heavy with cloves and cedar as you trudge through scented sands, and yes, you probably won't survive this, but that's the whole point, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments so we can compare who's dozing off at midnight and who's sipping morning coffee. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle alongside shadowed embalmers, your bare feet kicking up golden dust scented with crushed myrrh. Horse. One of the most prized spices in ancient Egypt, used in everyday skincare and sacred anointing alike. Mainstream archaeologists confirm that Egyptians sprinkled powdered myrrh over bodies to mask decay during the mummification process, blending it with natron salts for preservation. You might giggle imagining embalming artists wearing floral aprons, but believe it or not, these aromatic rituals were serious business. Historians still argue whether the choice of myrrh over frankincense was driven by preservation efficacy or purely by symbolic reverence. As you step closer, the bandage layers glint faintly, each wrapped coil infused with a heady resin mixture. Fringe lore suggests they sometimes tossed in dried lotus petals, yes, the same flower that pops up at every overpriced spa mimosa bar, believing it would guide your spirit like a riverboat pilot. You can almost hear a playful whisper, "No lotus lattes for you, beyond the veil." But the truth is stranger. Recent tomb analyses uncovered traces of cinnamon imported from ancient Sri Lanka, a spice so exotic that most commoners never sniffed its sugary warmth. You brush a hand against a rough linen shroud and your fingers catch tiny flecks of crushed peppercorn. Another fringe ingredient once thought to ward off mischievous spirits that like to tickle toes at midnight. Modern researchers debate whether peppercorn's antimicrobial properties actually helped stave off bacteria, or if it was simply a ghost repellent gimmick. Historians still argue whether such spices held practical use, or served as status symbols to impress whichever gods might RSVP to your funeral feast. The embalmers humming a low tune that sounds suspiciously like someone's ringtone, sorry. Ancient iPhone users anoint your temples with a spiced oil blend so slick it threatens to drip into your eyes. You blink once, and suddenly you're part of a timeless procession where the scent of cedar wood smoke curls around the tomb entrance like a welcoming mat. 3 light jokes tumble out here. Remember when you complained about perfume ads? You're about to star in the original scent commercial. Another, if you thought your shampoo had random ingredients, wait till you hear what they rubbed on your grandpa. And a final wink. They didn't have Instagram, but trust me, they knew how to hashtag #go big or go home. All around alabaster jars stand sentinel, each labeled in precise hieroglyphs that read like a spice rack. Inventory. Myrrh for healing, frankincense for divinity, cassia for sweetness, and bitumen for that extra sticky seal. Mainstream historians note that bitumen, a tar-like resin, was often used in later periods to fill cracks in hardened tissues, offering a second line of defense against rot. Yet scholars still debate whether it truly enhanced preservation or simply added theatrical flair to funerary art. You lean in, inhaling the complex bouquet of sticky pine, warm bark, and sweet resin. The embalmers exchange a nod, one sprinkles more frankincense dust as an offering to Osiris. Another murmurs a prayer to Anubis. You're midway through your spiced escort, halfway between life and legend, and oddly soothed by the gentle clink of pottery and low hum of ritual chants. You wander into a bustling market at dawn, the air thick with the scent of freshly ground cumin and crushed coriander seeds as vendors haggle beneath swaying linen awnings. In ancient Egypt, spices weren't reserved for royal tombs, they threaded through daily life like invisible silk ribbons. You might picture pharaohs draped in linen, but Common folk prized aromatic herbs in their kitchens, bathhouses, and even their toothpaste. Yes, you probably didn't know ancient Egyptians brushed with a mixture of mint and myrtle, though flossing was still. Ask your neighbor territory. So before you scroll to the next thing, take a moment to hit like and subscribe, or at least nod appreciatively if you're as spice-obsessed as they were. As you brush past stalls, your fingers graze sacks of anise, fennel, and dill. Mainstream historians confirm that Egyptians cultivated these fragrant plants along the Nile's fertile banks, using them to flavor stews of lentils, fish, and small game, as well as to freshen breath after a hearty meal. You inhale deeply, savoring that licorice-like warmth, and suddenly realize you're craving pickles, though. Don't pucker up just yet. Their version was likely a brine of salt, vinegar, and herbs, not the neon green jar variety. Historians still argue whether dill was primarily a culinary staple or a medicinal herb reserved for temple healers. You pass a woman weaving baskets of papyrus, and she tosses in sprigs of hyssop. A fringe tidbit suggests some Egyptians affixed hyssop in doorways to repel malevolent spirits, like an ancient do not disturb sign in floral form. You smirk, imagining ghostly banshees skirting around the porch. Sorry. Can't crash this house party. Hyssop's on guard. A nearby perfumer dips her fingers into a clay jar containing crushed marjoram, stirring in sesame oil to create a fragrant balm. You watch droplets slide down the jar, glinting in the sunlight. Pretty slick, right? These spiced oils weren't just for humans. Your feline companions probably got a dab behind the ears too, though they remained unimpressed. Meanwhile, open, scholarly debate still swirls around whether Egyptians used these oils to treat skin infections or simply to flaunt social standing in public bathing rituals. You stroll further until the pungent zing of black peppercorns nudges your nostrils. Imported from India by way of desert caravans, pepper once cost more than gold by weight, making it a luxury item for elites and merchants. But here's the kicker. Recent ceramic shard analyses unearthed traces of pepper residue in humble village kitchens, implying that some enterprising cooks sprinkled it into flatbread or fish stews. Bit of a spicy surprise for your palate, huh? Nearby, a brothy cauldron bubbles with beans and emmer wheat, and the cook ladles generous spoons of ground coriander into the pot. Historians note that coriander seeds have natural antimicrobial properties. Yet scholars still debate whether Egyptians understood this scientifically or stumbled upon it by accident. Meanwhile, a vendor hawks clove-scented lozenges for the throat. An early throat lozenge that might have doubled as an SPF for dragon breath. Childhood dragons sold separately. You dip a piece of flatbread into a shallow dish of pigeon stew, seasoned with cumin and caraway. Mainstream sources record that cumin was ubiquitous in Egyptian cooking, praised for both flavor and digestive aid. You savor the earthy warmth, then glance around, wondering if the cooks ever organized a bring-your-own-spice potluck. It's hard to imagine etiquette rules around garlic breath back then. Splashing through a shallow water channel used for ritual purification, you glimpse a cluster of plants mint sweet basil and rue. Quirky texts hint that mothers sucked on rue leaves to calm teething infants, though modern pediatricians would probably advise a proper teether over leafy herbal remedies. You almost laugh imagining a baby grimacing at a mouthful of minty herb. Thanks, Mom, but pass the teething ring. In an adjacent shrine, priests carry bowls of pennyroyal, sprinkling its crushed leaves onto altar flames to produce a smoke they believe facilitated communication with the gods. Fringe scholars still argue whether pennyroyal's psychoactive effects, yes. It contains compounds that can cause dizziness, were the real draw for spiritual trances, or merely dramatic ritual flair. You close your eyes, inhaling wisps of cooling pennyroyal smoke, and wonder if anyone ever exclaimed, "Whoa, dude, that incense is lit centuries before TikTok trends." You pause at a stall brimming with jars of thyme, a staple seasoning in fish stews and funerary offerings alike. And recall how Romans later adopted thyme from Egypt, believing it bestowed courage. Yet Egyptians used thyme more for practical healing. They mashed leaves into poultices for wounds, aligning with mainstream medical papyri that note thyme's antiseptic properties. Scholars still debate whether thyme's usage as medicine influenced its symbolic association with bravery, or if the link emerged later in Greece. Spotting a crate of imported galangal, a root cousin of ginger, you sniff its sharp aroma and think, someone really wanted a kick in their stew. Fringe botanical texts hint that galangal was also used to craft a potent aphrodisiac, though your mileage may vary. You grin, picturing an Egyptian pickup line. Hey baby, want to spice up more than just our dinner tonight? As afternoon heat intensifies, you sling a small linen satchel over your shoulder, woven with pockets of dried lavender and chamomile, both known for their calming qualities. Mainstream evidence shows Egyptians scattered these flowers in communal bathing areas to create a relaxing atmosphere. You can almost hear patrons murmuring, "Alexa, play soothing Nile ambiance." Historians still argue whether lavender's inclusion was functional or purely for luxury display. Finally, you drift toward a small school where scribes mix powdered saffron into ink to adorn important documents and royal decrees. Saffron's vivid hue and pungent scent marked prestige, though fringe tales claim scribes occasionally tasted the ink to ensure proper consistency. Talk about quality control. Modern forensic studies detect saffron compounds in ancient papyri, but scholars still debate whether its use was widespread or limited to air-dried samples. As you step away, sun slanted low, you realize spices were far more than exotic tomb trinkets. They were woven into every breath bite and ceremony of ancient Egyptian life. 3 light jokes drift through your mind. Stick around long enough and you'll start roasting cumin-flavored ghost stories. They didn't ghost their dates, they just ghosted them with incense. And if you think your pantry is diverse, wait till you raid an Egyptian scribe's ink stash. You slip past the faint outline of an open tomb chamber, your footsteps muffled by the thick layers of sand and straw matting left behind by earlier explorers. Myrrh's honeyed, resinous perfume drifts through the air, coiling around your senses like a velvet ribbon, one of the most sacred substances in ancient Egypt. You probably thought myrrh was just a perfume aisle relic, but here it becomes the star player in healing rituals, temple offerings, and yes, your very own embalming playlist. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians prized myrrh primarily for its antiseptic potency or for its symbolic role as a bridge between mortal flesh and divine afterlife. As you lean close, you notice alabaster vessels carved with lotus motifs, each holding hardened chunks of myrrh resin. Those glistening amber tears weren't just eye candy, they contained compounds that modern science confirms have genuine antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties. Mainstream sources note that myrrh oil extracted through steam distillation was used to treat wounds, combat infections, and even soothe sore throats when diluted in water and gargled. Yet some scholars still debate whether Egyptians understood these benefits empirically or attributed them purely to divine intervention. You reach out to touch a shard of resin, its surface cool and pitted like fossilized rain. Fringe lore whispers that embalmers sometimes added powdered myrrh to funeral bread, believing the departed could nibble on it in the afterlife. Talk about a last-minute snack run. You can almost hear someone quipping, "Don't forget the peanut butter." Though peanut cultivation was still millennia away, nearby priests chant the hymn to Osiris, wafting myrrh smoke through twisted copper censers. The incense's sticky embers curl upward, carrying prayers to the gods. Skeletal fans clack open and shut, fanning embalmers' turbans with a soft swish that rivals any ASMR track, except this one has a faint huff of worship. 3 light jokes escape your lips. If incense had Instagram, this would be the original smoke test. No candles here, just myrrh and a prayer. And they didn't do aromatherapy apps, but this beats any lavender lullaby. Your guide. A solemn attendant in linen robes dips fingertips into a bowl of powdered myrrh, then brushes it across hieroglyph-etched walls depicting the weighing of the heart. You feel the grainy texture scratch against your skin like fine sandpaper, leaving traces of gold dust that sparkle under torchlight. Mainstream Egyptologists confirm that myrrh's inclusion in these scenes symbolized purification and rebirth. Its amber hue echoing the sun god Ra's fiery chariot. Yet historians still argue whether the color choice was aesthetic or deeply theological. Further in, you find a low platform draped in white cloth, its edges streaked with myrrh-infused wine. Fringe accusations label this concoction an early anesthetic. Imagine sipping spiced, poison-flavored grape juice to dull pain before surgery. Though there's scant evidence that Egyptians actually used it this way. Modern chemists debate whether the alcohol and resin combination would have been potent enough to sedate anyone beyond a slight buzz. You step carefully over scattered papyrus scroll fragments detailing embalming formulas. The faded script lists myrrh alongside natron juniper berries and bitumen, a heady mix that embalmers believed sealed bodies against decay. Mainstream studies of resin coatings on mummies confirm that myrrh formed part of a barrier that slowed moisture loss and deterred insect activity. Yet scholars still dispute which ingredient did the heavy lifting. Was myrrh the star, or just the supporting act behind bitumen's stickiness? Between the chambers, a slender corridor glimmers with small bowls holding myrrh oil mixed with citrus extracts. Late-period innovations possibly influenced by Phoenician traders. You dab a drop behind your ear and taste the faintest hint of orange peel on your wrist. It's like someone bottled desert sunset, sweet, smoky, and slightly tangy. You catch yourself imagining modern spa ads revive your aura with Nile-inspired glow. A carved alcove houses a miniature shrine to Anubis, his jackal head tilted as if sniffing the scent of myrrh incense. You whisper a cheeky, "Hey buddy, what's good?" and slip a small resin piece into the shrine's offering dish. Legend has it that myrrh's aroma soothed restless spirits, preventing them from drifting off and rearranging your tomb treasures, so in theory it could stop ghosts from playing midnight Jenga with your heirlooms. Historians still argue whether these ghost-warding beliefs were widespread or limited to elite tombs. You pause beneath a vaulted ceiling painted in deep blues and golds, each lotus petal flickering in torchlight. Myrrh-coated cloth strips hang from overhead racks to dry, their heavy sweetness saturating the chamber. One particularly daring embalmer's apprentice jokes that they once tried smoking myrrh like tobacco. Needless to say, the resulting cough fest ended with him banished to clean jars. You giggle, picturing an ancient HR memo, "No myrrh smoking on site." Shafts of sunlight slice through narrow slits, illuminating swirling dust motes that catch the golden resin glow. You close your eyes, letting the layered fragrance envelop you in an almost meditative haze. Your breath slows and you wonder if this is what the soul felt before drifting into the Hall of Two Truths. 3 soft zingers rattle in your mind. Who needs lavender when you've got king-size sacred resin? Mummy masks, more like mummy's spa day. And bet Cleopatra wished she had a myrrh subscription box. Stepping toward the exit, you exchange a knowing smile with a stone Anubis statue, leaving behind one final question. Were you embalmed with myrrh for divine favor, or because someone thought your spirit would appreciate a spa-like send-off? Scholars still debate whether myrrh's primary role was spiritual, medicinal, or simply fashionable flair. With that, you back out into the corridor's warm glow, carrying the lingering whispers of myrrh's sacred dance between life, death, and the unknown. Let its sticky sweetness guide you onward, because in ancient Egypt, nothing soothed the soul's journey like a final gilded whiff of resin. You step into a dimly lit temple courtyard where the air shivers with curling tendrils of frankincense smoke, and you feel as if you've waded into a cloud spun from sweet pine and citrus. Temple attendants shuffle around bronze censers, each one glowing faintly under the flicker of oil lamps. Frankincense wasn't just perfume for the gods, it was their spoken language, a tangible prayer rising in delicate plumes. Mainstream Egyptologists note that priests offered frankincense at dawn and dusk to honor deities like Ra and Isis, believing the smoke carried their pleas skyward. Your fingertips brush the warm metal of a censer decorated with scarabs, and you inhale deeply, tasting faint hints of lemon rind and pine sap. In life, frankincense adorned royal palaces. In death, it heralded your passage into the next world. Scholars still argue whether Egyptians imported frankincense primarily for its aromatic allure or for its supposed magical potency. Fringe sources claim embalmers sometimes mixed tiny shards of resin into your linen shrouds, so that even in darkness you'd glow with divine favor, though the shroud cleaning staff probably muttered, "Spa day, please." As you drift between columns carved with hieroglyphs, you notice offerings of crushed frankincense mixed with honey spread atop low sandstone tables. A hush falls, broken only by the scrape of reed brushes and whispered chants. 3 light jokes drift through your mind. This is the original #blessed filter. Smells better than grandma's holiday candles, and if only there were frankincense-flavored gum back then. A senior priest carefully lights a cluster of tinder soaked in oil, then drops a hot ember onto a heap of resin tears. The resin sizzles and snaps like popcorn, releasing clouds of aromatic smoke that drift toward a stone shrine. You can almost hear the incense exclaim, "Party's here." Historians still argue whether the dramatic crackle was intended to startle evil spirits or simply entertain bored temple cats. You lean in closer and spot minuscule flecks of powdered frankincense scattered across ritual texts, evidence that scribes handled sacred scrolls only after dusting their palms with resin. Mainstream researchers confirm that frankincense oil, when distilled, contains compounds with mild sedative effects. Priests may have used it to calm nerves before elaborate ceremonies. Yet scholars still debate whether those calming properties were known consciously or chalked up to the divine aroma itself. Beyond the central altar, you spy a narrow corridor lined with offering niches. Each niche holds an alabaster jar labeled in vibrant blue hieroglyphs. Frankincense for cleansing, cinnamon for warmth, and resin, blends for resurrection. You pick up a jar labeled Ta'irin part frankincense and pop the lid, instant nostalgia for Costco candle aisle. Fringe myth says that if anyone sneezed while handling frankincense, they'd be blessed with prophetic dreams. You can't help but sniff deeply and hope for a spoiler about your next Netflix binge. A group of acolytes passes by carrying a wooden sledge topped with brass bowls of burning resin. You follow, trailing the smoky tide as it courses through the temple, pooling on the marble floor like a fragrant river. One acolyte casually tosses clove buds into the mix, mumbling, "Just a pinch for pizzazz." Cloves were rarer and pricier than frankincense during the New Kingdom, making their addition a status flex, though some historians still argue whether clove found its way into temples before the late period or only arrived via Phoenician trade. Your path curves into a small side chapel where flickering torches cast dancing shadows on walls painted with scenes of offerings and feasts. In the center lies a stone basin half filled with water, scented by frankincense and rose petals, an aromatic footbath for the high priest before he entered the inner sanctum. Mainstream accounts and temple manuals prescribe this ritual cleansing to purify both body and spirit, ensuring ritual precision. Yet scholars still debate whether the water-spice mixture's symbolic meaning overshadowed any practical hygiene benefits. Across the chapel, you see an ornate box carved from ebony and inlaid with ivory. Inside it, lumps of raw frankincense shipped from the land of Punt, Egypt's legendary trading partner. The Egyptians believed Punt lay at the edge of the world where goddesses walked on beaches of gold. Fringe tales maintain that Punt's frankincense trees were guarded by griffins, but modern scholars dismiss the beasts as metaphorical sentinels protecting precious cargo. A sudden breeze ruffles your hair, wafting in a new scent peppermint. You follow the cool twist of aroma to a niche where someone tucks sprigs of wild mint alongside frankincense offerings. Quirky herbal texts hint that mint helped guide lost spirits back to their bodies, preventing restless wanderers from photobombing your eternal selfie. Historians still argue whether mint's inclusion was medicinal, magical, or merely a happy accident when someone's lunch broke open in transit. You settle onto a cushioned bench and watch as a priestess lifts a small ladle of finely powdered frankincense mixed with myrrh, sprinkling it into a bronze bowl of burning charcoal. The resin melts into a glowing pool, turning the smoke thicker, almost syrupy. 3 soft jokes emerge. Somebody, get this goddess a latte. Frankincense, nature's original air freshener. And no, Febreze needed. As the smoke rises, the temple's massive stone door creaks open, revealing a shaft of sunlight that ignites golden motes in the haze. The priestess glances up, eyes luminous with devotion, and offers a silent nod, your cue to leave. You inhale one final plume of resin-sweet smoke, letting it coat your lungs and calm your mind. Stepping into the courtyard, you feel an odd weightlessness, as if the fragrance wrapped around your spirit like a soft blanket. Frankincense has served at countless rites of passage, from coronations to funerals, yet you realize its fragrance transcends any single ceremony. Scholars still debate whether it soothed the living, honored the dead, or simply delighted the divine. You breathe out slowly, carrying that piney citrus scent with you as you leave the temple's threshold. Who knew that a humble resin tear could bear the words you couldn't say? In ancient Egypt, frankincense wasn't just an offering. It was a conduit between worlds, a fragrant handshake, enabling a dialogue with the gods, and maybe, just maybe, it'll lull you closer to sleep tonight. You find yourself at the banks of a slow, wide canal where the scent of cinnamon weaves through the humid air, and you can almost taste the spicy sweetness on your tongue before it even reaches your lips. Cinnamon wasn't native to the Nile Valley. It arrived via long-distance trade routes stretching toward the lush forests of Sri Lanka and India. Mainstream trade records reveal that Egyptians imported small quantities of cinnamon during the New Kingdom, paying exorbitant prices to spice merchants who navigated deserts and seas alike. Historians still argue whether cinnamon's value stemmed from its exotic flavor, its preservative qualities, or its sheer novelty as a status symbol. A row of wooden crates rests on the riverbank, each bound with palm fiber rope and stamped with foreign seals. You pry open one crate and exhale a plume of fragrant dust that swirls lazily above the water. Cinnamon sticks, bundled like ancient scrolls, their reddish-brown bark layered in tight curls. Fringe lore suggests that some embalmers crushed cinnamon bark into a fine powder and mixed it with honey to create a sweet paste. They used to seal wounds in mummies, believing the combination repelled insects and pleased the gods. You can't help but picture a pampered mummy getting a post-mortem spa treatment. Extra honey hold the ants. Nearby porters unload jars of cinnamon oil distilled from the bark via early steam heating methods. The oil glistens like molten amber under the morning sun. Mainstream chemists note that cinnamon oil contains cinnamaldehyde, a compound with documented antimicrobial properties which could have slowed bacterial growth on prepared bodies. Yet scholars still debate whether Egyptians selected cinnamon for its medicinal benefits or if they simply admired its sweet, warming aroma. A small boat drifts past, piloted by a leather-skinned trader who sprinkles ground cinnamon onto slices of roasted duck as part of an experimental gourmet feast for the temple elite. You lean over the boat's edge, inhaling the heady scent, and suddenly feel a tickle in your nose. Cinnamon's sharp heat almost makes you sneeze. 3 light jokes escape your lips. Cinnamon, nature's pepper spray for your sinuses. They didn't have Starbucks, but imagine these water birds serving cinnamon-flavored fowl, and if mummies could talk, they'd say, less spice, more everything else. You follow the trader up a wooden plank onto the boat's deck, where dozens of narrow glass vials catch the sunlight. Each vial contains cinnamon-infused wine, perhaps the same elixir used in late-period burial rites to baptize the body before wrapping. Fringe stories claim that drinking this wine before embalming induced prophetic visions, although there's no solid evidence Egyptians actually consumed it during mummification. Modern oenologists debate whether the fermentation process would preserve enough cinnamaldehyde to produce any noticeable psychoactive effect. Stepping off the boat, you notice a cluster of fishermen mending nets along the shore. One elderly man dips his hand into a shallow clay bowl filled with powdered cinnamon and rubs it into his palm before wiping the nets. An odd practice you hadn't anticipated. Mainstream anthropologists suggest that cinnamon's natural insect repellent properties may have been employed in everyday tasks like this, though scholars still argue whether the effect was substantial or merely anecdotal. You smile at the image of mosquito nets cinnamon-scented to ward off pests and pirates alike. A little farther, you spot a carved stele depicting Amenhotep III majestically presenting bundles of cinnamon to foreign dignitaries. The hieroglyphs list cinnamon alongside gold and ivory symbols of wealth that funded massive temple projects. Historians note that Amenhotep's diplomatic gifts bolstered alliances, but they still debate whether the cinnamon shipments were symbolic tokens or strategic economic investments to secure timber and resin imports in return. Your path curves into a small embalmer's outpost overlooking the canal. Flat stone tables are stained with dark brown smears, where cinnamon-infused balms were prepared. You press a fingertip into the residue. Its stickiness coats your skin, leaving a faint, tingling warmth. Fringe alchemical texts claim embalmers sometimes added cinnamon to balms to mask the odor of decay, though mainstream sources point out that myrrh and frankincense likely did most of that work. Scholars still argue whether cinnamon's inclusion served a practical masking purpose or was purely ceremonial. Nearby benches hold rows of small flasks containing cinnamon-scented water used in ritual purification baths. You dip your hand into one flask and splash the water onto your forehead. Its gentle warmth seeps through your skin, calming your racing thoughts. Mainstream ritual manuals insist that such baths prepared both body and soul for sacred duties, yet historians still argue whether the scented water's primary role was spiritual or hygienic. You trudge past a cluster of date palms where a temple servant crushes fresh dates with a mortar and pestle, mixing the pulp with honey and a dash of cinnamon to create funeral cakes for the departed. The sweet blend tastes faintly on the breeze as you approach, and you wonder if the cakes were genuine offerings or simply symbolic placeholders on burial altars. Fringe culinary papyri hint that these cakes were once infused with a pinch of pepper talk about a spice surprise in your afterlife menu. A low murmuring drifts from a nearby shrine where priests chant over bowls of simmering cinnamon broth, a concoction believed to fortify the body for its journey through the duat. Mainstream theological texts reference such strengthening brews, yet scholars still debate whether these beverages were intended for the living, the dead, or both. You dip your fingers into the warm liquid, tasting a drop. Its gentle sweetness almost makes you wonder if modern chai latte influencers secretly borrowed this recipe. As dusk falls, lanterns flicker along the canal's edge, casting cinnamon-tinted shadows on weathered wood. You pull your linen cloak tighter, inhaling the lingering scent one last time. 3 soft zingers echo in your mind. Mummy Cafe, anyone? They didn't cosplay as spice traders, but maybe they should have. And next time you bake cookies, Thank the pharaohs. Stepping onto solid ground, you realize cinnamon bridged continents and cultures infusing everything from embalmers' balms to diplomatic gifts. Its sweet heat mingled with solemnity and celebration alike, leaving a fragrant trail through ancient Egyptian life and death. Historians still debate whether cinnamon's true power lay in preservation prestige or pure aromatic delight. But one thing's certain, its scent still whispers secrets of spice-laden sands and storied waterways, guiding you gently onward. You push open a narrow doorway into a shadowy antechamber where the air hangs heavy with the sharp tang of bitumen. A thick, tar-like resin seeped from pitch pits or distilled from natural asphalt springs. You probably associate bitumen with modern roadwork, yet ancient Egyptians smeared it across linen wrappings and tomb walls alike. Mainstream analyses show that bitumen formed a glossy, impermeable layer, sealing out moisture and insects to retard decay. Historians still argue whether bitumen's true value lay in pragmatic preservation or in the dramatic visual spectacle of shiny, black-coated mummies. Your fingertips brush the slick surface of a stone bench streaked with dark residue, leaving smudges like greasy fingerprints on antique silverware. Fringe tales claim embalmers sometimes added crushed gemstones to bitumen mixtures, believing the sparkles trapped wandering spirits. You stifle a laugh imagining a mummy sparkling under torchlight like an undead disco ball. All hail the king of the dance hall. A low clatter echoes as an attendant rolls out wooden vats of warmed bitumen, their insides coated in sticky layers earned from centuries of use. You lean in and inhale the faint whiff of sulfur and earth, picturing workers gently heating the resin over braziers to achieve that perfect pourable consistency. Mainstream archaeologists confirm that bitumen's adhesive properties helped secure funerary masks and decorative amulets to the body. Yet scholars still debate whether bitumen alone could have preserved soft tissues or if it mainly served as a symbolic barrier between life and corruption. Three light jokes surface: who knew road tar would become ancient Egypt's MVP? This is why you never skip leg day, bitumen's watching, and mummies before makeup, the original beauty mask. You step closer to a wide stone basin where embalmers stir bitumen with cedar oil and crushed juniper berries. The mixture bubbles like a smoky stew, and you can't resist dipping a fingertip in its warmth, spreads across your skin leaving a faint pine-tinged afterglow. Many believe these botanical additives masked bitumen's acrid odor, blending smoky resin with forest scents. Yet fringe cookbooks hint that some embalmers experimented with chili pepper in these blends to create a tingling wake-up sensation if the deceased ever tried to roam around. Historians still argue whether that was a prank or a bona fide anti-ghost measure. To your left, hieroglyphic inscriptions on smooth limestone walls detail the opening of the mouth ceremony, while illustrations depict priests anointing the face with bitumen before reciting sacred spells. Mainstream Egyptologists note that this ritual symbolically restored the deceased's ability to breathe, speak, and taste in the afterlife. Yet scholars still debate whether bitumen's role was purely symbolic or grounded in a real belief that its sealing properties conferred life-sustaining power. As you follow a narrow passage, you stumble upon a metal scoop half buried in grit. You lift it, wiping away dust to reveal glistening tar stencils on its surface, an embalmer's tool for precise application. Fringe myth suggests that any mistake in applying bitumen risked trapping the soul outside the body, leading to eternal wanderings and awkward party crashing at neighboring tombs. You shiver at the thought of dodging spectral freeloaders rummaging through your sarcophagus stash. Sorry, no chips in here. 3 soft zingers drift by bitumen. The original cling film. If mummies had scratch and sniff cards, this would be the OD Eternity Edition, and thinking of renovating, try bitumen, it's Asphalt Ali awesome. You enter the main burial chamber where the sarcophagus lid lies nearby, edges dipped in rich black bitumen. Inscriptions boast of the king's eternal reign, while the resin's glossy sheen captures torchlight, reflecting dancing flames across the vaulted ceiling. Mainstream studies find that bitumen layers in royal tombs were often thicker than in commoner burials, underscoring a status hierarchy in preservation techniques. Yet historians still argue whether this disparity stemmed from resource availability, ritual necessity, or simply the desire to outshine one's peers in the next world. Nearby alabaster jars hold samples of natron, mixed with powdered bitumen, hinting at experimental recipes embalmers tested over time. You scoop a pinch and rub it between your fingers, feeling gritty grains coated in tar. The natron drew moisture from tissues while the bitumen sealed the surface together, forming a stealthy defense against rot. Yet scholars still debate whether the ratio mattered more than the ingredients themselves, or if bitumen's glue-like qualities stole the spotlight while natron did the heavy lifting. A hush falls as you approach a small shrine tucked into the chamber's corner. Inside rests a statuette of Anubis, his jackal head tilted, gazing solemnly at a bowl of cooled bitumen. Fringe whispers say the resin bowl served as a taste test for souls re-entering their bodies. If the bitumen stuck to their tongues, they'd be declared unworthy and left to wander. You laugh nervously, picturing an otherworldly tongue tug-of-war. Sorry, pal, you flunked the stick test. Mainstream papyri fragments recovered nearby list bitumen among a roster of vital embalming ingredients alongside myrrh and frankincense. Experts confirm these lists guided embalmers through standardized recipes that spanned dynasties. Yet scholars still argue whether each region had its own secret bitumen formula, or if a central temple authority controlled its distribution like a resin monopoly. 3 light jokes resurface bitumen, making mummies fashionably dark since 3000 BCE. Tar, you glad you didn't skip this step, and this is one makeover you can't wash off. You lean back against the cool stone wall, letting the slick residue smear across your palm. The sticky embrace of bitumen seems to bind past and present, preserving not only flesh but also untold stories. Your breath slows as the chamber's hush deepens, and you realize that this resin, so humble and often maligned, played a pivotal role in eternalizing lives that might otherwise have slipped quietly into dust. As you step toward the doorway, the corridor's light beckons you onward, trailing that tarry scent behind like a stubborn shadow. Bitumen may not glimmer like gold or perfume like spices, but in ancient Egypt, nothing said, "Never forget me," quite like a glossy jet black seal against oblivion. You step into a low-ceilinged chamber where soft torchlight dances on walls slick with anointing oils, and the air feels almost viscous with warmth and spice. A line of alabaster basins stands before you, each filled with a different translucent liquid tinted amber rose or pale green. These spiced oils weren't mere fragrances, they were the final touches on your journey, slick conduits, anointing you from mortal coil to divine guest. Mainstream records note that priests and embalmers applied these oils during the opening of the mouth ritual to restore your senses, while your skin absorbed the aromas meant to comfort the soul. You bend to inspect the first basin, its surface mottled with floating petals and shards of something crystalline. This is the famed Kai-Fi oil blend, rumored to contain honey wine, cinnamon, and juniper. Mainstream texts confirm Kai-Fi was burned as incense, but here it serves as a decadent massage oil. Historians still argue whether Kai-Fi's therapeutic use was widespread or reserved strictly for pharaohs and high-ranking nobles. You dip a fingertip into the amber liquid and smear it across your wrist. The honeyed sweetness coats your skin sticky yet soothing, as if the oil itself whispers encouragement. Moving on, you discover a bowl tinted pink by crushed rose petals suspended in sesame oil, an everyday luxury. You probably picture rose oil as romantic, but here it was practical, used to smooth linen bandages and calm inflammation. Fringe lore suggests scribes once anointed their quills with rose oil to produce smooth strokes on papyrus. Imagine ancient calligraphy fueled by petal-driven zealousness. 3 light jokes swirl in your mind. Who knew? Roses doubled as ancient chapstick. Skip the spa appointment, just crash a tomb and pedal power making hieroglyphs flow since 2500 BCE. You trail your fingers along a third basin filled with emerald-hued oil, perfumed by crushed coriander and dill. The uneasy mix seems odd at first, yet entomologists acknowledge coriander's insect-repellent qualities, suggesting it served a dual-purpose scent and preservation. Scholars still debate whether embalmers consciously concocted bug-fighting balms or stumbled upon the effect by artistry. You inhale deeply, tasting faint notes of licorice and earth, and suddenly wonder if this was the original bug spray for wandering spirits. A solemn attendant beckons you forward to the largest basin its contents, shimmering darkly. An oil infused with myrrh and frankincense distillates blended into a resinous elixir. You lean in as he dips a linen strip into the mixture and gently wipes it across your forehead and chest. The texture feels thick yet slick like warm candle wax just melted. Mainstream sources affirm that such blends provided both antiseptic action and symbolic purification. Yet historians still argue whether the scents prepared your body for the afterlife or simply impressed visiting mourners with lavish spectacle. 3 gentle jokes float by. Who needs cologne when you've got embalming? Grade eau de myrrh. PSA, don't try this oil as a hair treatment and memory foam pillow. Nah, try a spiced oil mattress. To your right, a small alcove houses vials of brightly colored oil tinctures, deep red from crushed red palm fruit, golden yellow from sesame seeds, and pale blue from indigo leaves. Yes, indigo imported for its dye, but repurposed here for its cool, calming aura. Fringe herbalists claim indigo oil wards off nightmares. Though mainstream scholars still debate whether Egyptians prized it for color symbolism, blue for the heavens, or for tangible sedative effects. You pour a few drops onto your palms and rub them together. The faintest stain tints your skin royal azure for a moment before fading. Further along, you notice a basin containing a thin layer of olive oil drizzled with burnt frankincense ash. The attendant invites you to dip your elbow in. He explains that this mixture symbolized death's transformation into rebirth, the black ash merging with life-giving oil. Mainstream ritual manuals describe this as a metaphorical cleansing, though historians still argue whether participants felt physically cleansed or spiritually reborn. You emerge with a subtle gray sheen on your skin and quietly wonder if ash-infused facials will trend on social media next year. A final basin holds a rare libation of heated sesame and castor oil, spiked with crushed lotus petals. Lotus, emblem of creation and regeneration, lent its numbing properties to the mix, so your final anointing came with a gentle tingling that eased any residual discomfort. Scholars still debate whether lotus served as a mild analgesic or purely as symbolic flora. You lean forward, letting the warm oil cascade across your shoulders. The sensation is oddly ticklish, coaxing a soft laugh from your lips. As you stand amidst these bowls of liquid warmth, the oil's combined fragrance envelops you. Sweet honey, resinous smoke, floral, rose-sharp coriander, and earthy lotus. You realize that in this anointing chamber, spice and oil fused art, medicine, and theology into one seamless ritual. 3 soft zingers surface. Next time you moisturize, remember you're channeling ancient embalmer chic. Don't judge. Olay had nothing on these guys. And is it ASMR or just life's richest lotion? Your attendant wraps a fresh linen cloth around you, gently patting away excess oil. The soft fabric glides over your skin, carrying the blended aroma outward into the corridor beyond. You inhale deeply, letting the spiced oils seal not just your body, but your memory, anchoring each scent as a milestone on this journey toward eternal rest. With that, you step from the anointing chamber, your skin humming with warmth and fragrance. Let these spiced oils carry you onward, each drop a whispered promise of renewal and repose. You enter a spacious antechamber lined with stacks of linen rolls, their soft fibers awaiting the final touch, resin-infused bandages that bind body and spirit together. Embalmers bustle around low tables, dipping swaths of cloth into vats of heated resin blends before meticulously wrapping each layer. These layers aren't random swaths. They form a complex pattern of cross-hatching, soaked in myrrh, frankincense, and bitumen, every wrap a fragrant fortress. Mainstream studies reveal that such resinous wrappings created a semi-permeable seal, slowing moisture loss while allowing gases to escape. Yet scholars still argue whether this method was chosen for preservation symbolism or pure olfactory extravagance. You lean in to admire the intricate technique first, a base layer of coarse linen dipped in pine resin, then successive wraps brushed with cinnamon oil for sweetness, and finally a thin veil of frankincense-laced cloth for divine protection. Fringe lore whispers that embalmers sometimes hid tiny amulets and spells within the fold, secret talismans placed just behind the ear or tucked beneath the heart. You smile at the thought of a miniature Book of the Dead bookmark nestled in your wrappings, guiding you page by page through the underworld. 3 light jokes drift by. Who needs jewelry when you've got built-in amulets? It's like a mummy burrito. Extra spicy and wrap party, anyone? As you watch, an older embalmer's master inspects each wrapped mummy, spraying a final mist of spiced water. Perhaps pennyroyal, perhaps lotus. Over the surface, the mist settles into the folds, reviving dried resins and knitting the layers snugly together. Mainstream Egyptologists note that such mists helped redistribute volatile oils, maintaining the bandage's fragrant potency over time. Yet historians still debate whether this step was primarily ritualistic or practical maintenance. Nearby, a scribe meticulously catalogs each mummy's wrapping recipe on papyrus scrolls, listing ingredient ratios and wrap counts, sometimes up to 30 layers for royalty. You spot columns for myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, and bitumen, each annotated with tiny hieroglyphic notes about color, scent, and texture. Fringe reports suggest scribes occasionally doodled cartoons of embalmers slipping in spilled resin, though no official transcript includes such antics. You chuckle, picturing an ancient office memo reminder, watch your step around the resin vat. 3 gentle zingers surface. DIY mummy makeover kits sold separately. Talk about wrapping it up, and your Netflix binge has nothing on the binge of wrappings. You step closer to a half-wrapped body, laid out on a raised platform, its already draped limbs glinting with resin's glossy sheen. An attendant hands you a fresh strip of linen. Dipping it into a bowl of scented resin, you continue the pattern, smoothing out air pockets and ensuring each band lies flat. The resin's warmth seeps into your fingers as you wrap, and you feel oddly connected to craftspeople who practice this art for millennia. In a corner, jars of fringe spices, marigold petals, hyssop leaves, and carob pod shavings stand alongside mainstream ingredients. The master embalmers occasionally blended these fringe elements into outer bandages, believing they offered additional protection against malevolent forces. Scholars still argue whether these oddball inclusions were genuine ritual components or simply local flavor. You pluck a few marigold petals and tuck them into your linen sleeve, tiny wards for your own dreams tonight. As the final layer is applied, the swaddled form resembles a sculpture, smooth, glistening, and faintly perfumed. A soft hush blankets the chamber as embalmers lift the mummy onto a bier, gently rocking it to test the seal. 3 soft jokes echo, handle with care, fragile souls inside mummy on the move. And this is one boxed set you can't binge watch. You step back, letting the swaddled figure glide away under hands that move with ancient precision. The air lingers heavy with myrrh and cedar cinnamon warmth, and resinous tar, each layer a fragrant chapter in your journey. As you exit the wrapping chamber, the scent trails behind you like a persistent lullaby, urging your mind toward rest and reflection. Let these resinous bandages guide your dreams, each layer weaving history and ritual into your slumbering soul. You cross a low threshold into a vaulted chamber where the scent of cinnamon and cedar interlaces like an aromatic tapestry, and your breath catches as if you've inhaled a soft, spicy blanket. Cinnamon's sweet heat and cedar's woody depth weren't just pleasant aromas in ancient Egypt. They functioned as status markers, whispered declarations of wealth and power. Mainstream records show that cedar wood arrived from Lebanon via bustling Mediterranean trade prized for its fragrance and durability, while cinnamon imported from distant Sri Lanka carried an exotic allure. Historians still argue whether their combined use signified deep spiritual symbolism or simply flamboyant showmanship among elites. A line of pedestals stands before you, each bearing rectangular blocks of finely carved cedar wood streaked with cinnamon resin. You reach out to touch one block, the smooth surface warming in your palm as the cinnamon-infused resin leaves a faint reddish tint. Fringe gossip claims some nobles had their entire palaces outfitted with cedar panels rubbed nightly with cinnamon paste. Imagine your living room smelling like a holiday spice bazaar every day for life. You smirk at the thought, home sweet cinnamon cedar home. An attendant glides over offering a thin slice of cedar bark dusted with powdered cinnamon. Tasting it releases a burst of warmth that tickles your tongue and soothes your throat. Mainstream culinary texts from papyrus fragments confirm that cinnamon cedar infusions were used as ceremonial drinks during high feasts, though scholars still debate whether they actually drank the concoction or poured it over roasted meats as a glaze. You swirl the slice in your mouth, eyes watering slightly at the spicy kick, and mentally congratulate yourself on surviving this sensorial gauntlet. 3 light jokes whirl through your mind. Cinnamon cedar latte, anyone? They didn't have Starbucks, but they nailed the holiday vibes, and if mummies could Christmas carol, this would be their jam. You wander deeper into the chamber where cedar pillars carved with royal insignias form an aromatic corridor. Each pillar sports shallow grooves filled with a mixture of cinnamon oil and crushed frankincense, an extravagant touch that released waves of spicy sweet smoke whenever torches flickered nearby. Mainstream archaeologists note that cedar's natural insect-repellent oils protected wooden structures, while cinnamon's antimicrobial properties may have helped preserve organic elements. Yet scholars still argue whether these functional benefits drove the practice or if it existed purely for sensory luxury. Beside one pillar, a low table showcases small urns of rare spiced incense blends. One mixes equal parts: cedar chips, cinnamon bark, and juniper berries. Another adds a pinch of saffron for color and solemnity. Fringe herbalists assert that when burned, these blends could induce vivid dreams of royal banquets and divine audiences, an early form of political propaganda, perhaps. Historians still debate whether dream induction was an intentional effect or a post hoc interpretation by scribes recording anecdotal visions. You pick up a cedar and cinnamon wand about the length of your forearm and watch as a temple caretaker ignites one end, sending spirals of aromatic smoke into the vaulted ceiling. The curling tendrils of scent drift over gilded sarcophagi and painted reliefs as though blessing each container with luxury. 3 soft jokes drift by. Who needs potpourri when you've got scented fire sticks? This is like the original incense vape pen, and if only they made room sprays back then. As you follow the smoky haze, you notice hieroglyphs along the walls celebrating a pharaoh's triumphs. Each glyph is accented with colored resin, a mix of cedar extract and cinnamon dust to make the reliefs pop in sunlight. Mainstream conservationists confirm that these resin coatings helped protect pigments from fading. Yet scholars still argue whether preservation or aesthetic impact was the primary motive. You run a fingertip over a highlighted cartouche, leaving a faint fingerprint that smells faintly of spice. Your path leads you to a raised platform where a cedarwood bier rests draped in linen embroidered with cinnamon-colored thread. On the bier lies a ceremonial mask of gold and obsidian, its edges scented by strips of cedar soaked in cinnamon-infused oil. You lean closer, noticing tiny cracks in the mask's neck ridge, filled with the same spiced oil, likely to conceal seams and ward off unwanted visitors to the afterlife. Fringe legends claim this sweet-smelling barrier deterred tomb robbers more effectively than walls of granite. Robbers supposedly loathed the scent so much they'd flee empty-handed. Mainstream records of robbery attempts, however, offer mixed evidence, and scholars still debate whether scent played any role at all in ancient security measures. 3 gentle zingers surface. Talk about fragrance as fortification. Who knew cinnamon could guard treasures? And if only modern safes smelled this inviting. Stepping down from the platform, you encounter a pool of water reflecting torchlight. An alabaster basin overflows with cinnamon, cedar-scented water, invited as a purification ritual for visitors. You dip a hand in and splash it onto your face. The cool liquid carries a subtle warmth from the spices, awakening your senses. Mainstream ritual guides describe such water as a symbol of renewal before entering sacred spaces. Yet historians still argue whether the act was chiefly hygienic or strictly ceremonial. Nearby, a narrow alcove holds a scroll case bearing detailed drawings of spice storage. Cedar chests lined with cinnamon-soaked linen to protect against humidity, ensuring cinnamon bark remained fragrant for months. You unroll one sketch, admiring the precision, and notice marginal notes debating the best bark-to-resin ratio. Fringe archivists claim some chests contained hidden compartments for secret correspondence scented in cinnamon oil to mask ink odors, a kind of ancient ode d'espionage. Scholars still debate whether such spycraft whispers were common or the stuff of overactive imaginations. 3 soft jokes bob in your thoughts, secret messages. More like cinnamon-spiced gossip. CIA cinnamon. Intelligence agents in stealth mode scented edition. With your hands still fragrant, you exit the cinnamon cedar chamber, its woven scents clinging to your clothes like a tag-along memory. You realize cinnamon and cedar were more than mere perfumes, they were status symbols, etched in wood and smoke signals of power channeled through scent. Historians still argue which mattered more, the function or the flair. But for now, you carry that warm, spiced aroma with you, its lingering whisper nudging your mind ever closer to a dreamlike slumber. You enter a narrow stone corridor lined with clay jars, each stamped with the name of a different spice and sealed with wax. Above them, carved niches hold scorch marks, evidence of ancient experiments in smoke-infused preservation. As you approach, a jar labeled garlic emits a faint sulfurous waft. Yes, garlic featured in burial rituals believed to ward off both decay and malevolent spirits. Mainstream analyses detect allichin's antibacterial properties in mummy wrappings, yet scholars still debate whether Egyptians consciously selected garlic for its germ-fighting power, or if its pungency simply served to mask harsher odors. Next, you encounter a series of small pots marked coriander, cumin, and caraway, their contents layered in neat bands of colored powder. The embalmers tested each spice's preservative qualities by burning sample cloths dipped in spiced oils, observing which ones resisted mold longest. Fringe lore claims they even ranked aromas by divine favor. Mustard got Osiris's nod, sage was Sekhmet's pick. Though mainstream historians remain skeptical, historians still argue whether these tests were empirical or ritualistic performances. 3 light jokes drift by Spice Lab or Ghost Kitchen. Gordon Ramsay would be thrilled, and your spices lack discipline, ancient Egyptian edition. As you progress, a faint hum leads you to a chamber of whispering walls, hieroglyphs, etched near spice jars contain instructions for mixing rare blends. One passage reads, "Anoint the heart thrice with resinous salt of the north wind," a poetic reference to natron infused with crushed rosemary. Scholars still debate whether these botanical metaphors encoded secret recipes or served purely as poetic homage. You pause at a small basin containing granulated salt mixed with juniper berry dust swirling with iridescent flecks. The attendant invites you to taste a grain. Its minty bite jolts your senses awake. Mainstream studies confirm juniper's antiseptic qualities, yet debates persist on whether Egyptians applied it topically or ingested it in ritual potions. Further along, a carved stone bench supports vials of liquid spice, extracts an amber tincture of turmeric. Though fringe accounts of turmeric in ancient Egypt are wildly contested alongside deep purple extracts of beetroot and grape must. You watch as the attendant drops a single bead of turmeric extract onto a linen cloth, watching it absorb into the fibers like a trap for time. Historians still argue whether turmeric arrived via early trade with India or if later scribes retroactively attributed its presence. Three gentle zingers surface. Spice of the Pharaohs meets Bollywood. Gandhi would raise an eyebrow, an ancient fusion cuisine. Anyone. As the corridor ends, you step into a small alcove where jars of powdered mushrooms, likely agarikon or ganoderma, sit alongside frankincense shards. Although mainstream evidence for fungal preservatives is scant, fringe herbalists argue these mushrooms offered medicinal benefits to the embalming team. Scholars remain divided on whether such fungi featured in routine rituals or belong to esoteric rites. A soft breeze drifts through carrying the scent of smashed pomegranate seeds and anise, a final spice mixture believed to symbolize rebirth and fertility. You inhale deeply, letting the sweet aniseed aroma cleanse your senses. Mainstream papyri reference pomegranate in funerary offerings, yet academics still debate the extent of its use beyond symbolic gestures. Three final gentle jokes echo: pomegranate or granite fruit, anise please, and when life gives you pomegranates, make funeral offerings. You step out of the spice testing corridor, your nostrils buzzing with a chorus of aromatic memories. Here, experimentation and belief twisted together, each spice trial pushing the boundaries of preservation and piety. As you leave, the echo of clinking jars fades, but their fragrances linger, gentle guides toward the realm of dreams. You step into a cramped niche, illuminated by flickering oil lamps, the air thick with curious aromas that feel almost alchemical: cloves of garum, crushed nightshade berries, and dusty piles of powdered mandrake root. Fringe lore credits these oddball ingredients with supernatural prowess, claiming they warded off ghostly intruders and malevolent spirits that might fancy rearranging your tomb's treasures. Mainstream researchers examining residue on pottery shards confirm that some Egyptians did experiment with mandrake and nightshade in ritual contexts, but historians still argue whether such practices were mainstream or confined to fringe cults. Leaning against a rough-hewn limestone wall, you notice a shallow basin carved into the stone, its floor coated with a mosaic of spice fragments. Fragrant coriander mingles with the bitter tang of henbane, and tiny pearls of salt sparkle beside shards of mandrake. You might recoil at the sight. Mandrake's reputation for hallucinogenic properties likely came from its alkaloids, but embalmers reportedly believed it offered psychic protection. Scholars still debate whether the Egyptians recognized mandrake's psychoactive effects or if they relied on its mythical reputation as a deterrent to the restless dead. You crouch to inspect a small clay bottle sealed with wax and tucked into a side alcove. Opening it releases a heady cloud of crushed black henbane seeds blended with juniper oil. Fringe herbalists insist that henbane's potent compounds produced an intoxicating smoke that mistook spirits for corpses, confusing them into leaving you in peace. Mainstream analyses of burned residues in tombs detect traces of henbane and nightshade, but academics still argue whether these plants were used deliberately for their chemical effects or included more for symbolic theater. 3 light jokes drift through your mind. When your neighbor complains about weird incense, just say it's spirit-proofing Mandrake, nature's original guard dog, and ghosts had to swipe left on these fumes. You rise and move to a low table where an attendant unfurls a tattered papyrus scroll bearing an illustrated recipe: mix powdered mandrake root with crushed garlic and pitch oil, burn beneath the heart. The accompanying hieroglyphs depict a small jackal sniffing the fragrant smoke tail tucked hopefully between its legs. Scholars still debate whether these recipes were taken seriously by state priests or dismissed as rustic superstition. Next to the scroll sits a shallow dish of garum oil made from fish sauce boiled down with a handful of peppercorns and a sprig of rue. Mainstream findings show garum's strong aroma would overpower more subtle sense of decay. But historians still argue whether Egyptians actually used a fermented fish residue, a staple in Greek cuisine, or simply imported the term to describe a potent local brine. You dab a fingertip into the murky oil and rub it under your nose. Its briny tang assaults your senses, a culinary Rorschach test that feels strangely medieval hipster. 3 gentle zingers surface. Forget nose rings. This is the nose redefinition. Restaurant closing time came early in ancient Egypt, and at least you won't mistake these fumes for perfume. You wander deeper into the niche where a recessed shelf holds clay altars topped with bowls of stinking salad, a pungent mix of radish seeds, leek extract, and roasted chickpeas. Fringe texts claim the resulting stench was so horrific that wandering spirits fled in terror, convinced the room was already occupied by a more malignant presence. Scholars still debate whether this practice ever occurred beyond small village shrines or if it remained the domain of prankster cults. Leaning in, you spot a glimmer of bright blue powder beneath the stinking salad bowls. Egyptian blue or coupe rorivete, a synthetic pigment believed to have magical connotations. Mainstream pigment analysis reveals that Egyptian blue could also serve as an antimicrobial agent when mixed into resins, though historians still argue whether embalmers valued its chemical properties or sought its sacred symbolism linking the color to the heavens. 3 whispered jokes drift by. Stinking salad ghost's least favorite snack. 1 whiff and your afterlife plan changes, and if spirits could Yelp review, they'd give 0 stars. You continue to a small, raised platform where a rustic brazier smolders with a resinous mixture of pitch, boiled down lotus extract, and a pinch of saffron. The attendant stirs the smoldering coals, releasing wisps of smoke that smell simultaneously sweet and acrid. Fringe alchemists championed saffron's reputed mystical qualities, claim to ignite inner suns, while mainstream sources note its genuine antiseptic action in resinous balms. Yet, scholars still debate whether Egyptians prized saffron more for color drug symbolism or for tangible preservative benefits. A nearby papyrus fragment lists other fringe ingredients: tansy blossoms, opium, poppy husks, and powdered saltpeter, each annotated with warnings. Use sparingly, for the line between spirit repellent and soul sedative is thin. Historians still argue whether such cautionary notes reflect practical knowledge of toxicity or merely moralistic scribal admonitions. You read the scrawl, half expecting a calligraphic margin note, author's disclaimer not FDA approved. 3 soft quips echo in your thoughts. Spirit ejection. Seat now with 90% more opium. Warning may cause afterlife sedation, and ancient Egyptians ahead in ghost control. You step back, inhaling another breath of the smoldering mix, letting the spiced alchemical haze swirl around you like an experimental perfume. Each fringe spice here embodies a blend of myth and medicinal curiosity, an alchemist's playground where experimentation and faith coalesced. Scholars still debate whether these odd ingredients ever gained widespread acceptance or remained peculiar footnotes in spiritual texts. With the final puff of smoke lingering in the air, you turn to leave this curious niche. 3 gentle jokes float in parting. If ghosts complain, just remind them of the henbane DIY exorcism kits you had separately. And next time your cat acts strange, maybe it's just protecting you. Stepping out into a broader corridor perfumed with more conventional spices, you carry the memory of these alchemical oddities, a reminder that ancient Egyptians navigated a spectrum from practical preservation to mystical experimentation. Let these fringe scents intrigue your dreams, guiding you into realms where myth and chemistry entwine. You step into a broad, echoing hall where the smooth limestone walls bear layered inscriptions marking centuries of evolving spice rituals, and you feel the weight of dynasties shifting around you. Here, spices weren't static relics. They danced across time with new arrivals, replacing old favorites and forgotten blends, surfacing like ghostly echoes. Mainstream chronologies show that during the Old Kingdom, embalmers relied heavily on local resins such as frankincense and myrrh, whereas by the New Kingdom, imported spices like cinnamon and cassia had become prominent in both funerary and temple rites. Historians still argue whether these changes reflected genuine advancements in preservation techniques or simply mirrored Egypt's expanding trade networks. A massive mural stretches before you, each horizontal band painted in distinct hues to denote different reigns. In the topmost register, dating to the era of Djoser, you see simplistic depictions of priests carrying handfuls of natron and scraped juniper over mummies. By contrast, the middle panel under Hatshepsut's rule illustrates elaborate processions of camels laden with exotic spices, cinnamon sticks, cassia barks, and sacks of green cardamom. Fringe historians cheekily suggest that Hatshepsut might have staged spice expos to promote her trading relationships, but mainstream scholars attribute these depictions to genuine ceremonial imports recorded in temple annals. 3 light jokes flutter. Spice Trade Shows Ancient Egypt Edition. VIP passes courtesy of Pharaoh's Pantry and Meet the Mummy. Now, with free cinnamon samples, you follow the mural's timeline downward to the Ramesside period, where threads of incense smoke curl around the names of Ramesses II and III. Here, priests kneel before giant censers loaded not just with frankincense, but with lesser-known spices like galbanum and storax, arboreal resins imported from the Mediterranean coast. Mainstream chemists analyzing tomb residues detect trace amounts of these resins, confirming their use in later dynasties. Yet scholars still debate whether galbanum's inclusion aimed to improve antiseptic action or served primarily to diversify ritual fragrances. On a side wall, you notice graffiti-like notes scratched by later scribes complaining about the cost of imported spices. My mistress demanded cinnamon again. Inflation is worse than Nile flooding. One lament reads. You grin, imagining an ancient memo board supply request enough myrrh to drown out Helen's dinner breath. Such cheeky inscriptions provide a quirky window into everyday frustrations amid grand royal ceremonies. Venturing deeper, you find a raised platform where a rotating display of jars reveals shifting spice preferences through the centuries. The earliest jars brim with sesame oil and crushed mint mainstream papyri confirm these blends were prized for anointing novices and commoners alike. Moving along, you see vessels filled with frankincense pumpkin seed mixtures from the Middle Kingdom. A curious concoction scholars still argue about whether it was a trial blend for improved texture or a symbolic nod to agricultural bounty. A slender attendant invites you to lift a lid labeled Late Period Blend. Inside lies a complex mix of myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, saffron, and a hint of lotus extract. You inhale the layered aroma, tasting sweet spice floral undertones and a whisper of aquatic lotus and olfactory timeline condensed into a single breath. Mainstream conservators note that late-period mummies often exhibit more complex resin coatings, while historians still debate whether this complexity enhanced preservation or simply signaled ritual opulence in a time of political decline. 3 gentle jokes waft through your thoughts. Death by 1,000 cents Spice Lord. Ramses strikes again, and who knew olfactory history could be this rich? Beyond the platform, niche displays showcase dynasty-specific rituals. Under the 21st dynasty, you observe a bowl of spiced natron infused with rosemary and rue, a departure from earlier bitumen-heavy formulas. Fringe herbalists argue that rosemary's antioxidant qualities were consciously leveraged to protect against microbial growth, though many Egyptologists maintain that its inclusion was largely symbolic, representing remembrance and cleansing. Historians still argue whether rosemary's practical benefits influenced its adoption or if it remained a poetic flourish. On a raised ledge, clay tablets record recipe revisions spanning 500 years. Add 1 part cinnamon, 2 parts frankincense, scrawled in hieratic script. Marginal notes revise ratios, sometimes replacing myrrh with storax when supplies ran low. You trace a finger along the tablet, feeling the engraved grooves of history itself. It's a mainstream fact that embalmers maintain these recipe archives in temple libraries. Yet scholars still debate how standardized these records were across regions, and whether local officials had autonomy to adapt them. Nearby, a small interactive model lets you turn a dial to mix virtual spice proportions, slide toward early dynasty for a frankincense-heavy scent, or twist toward late dynasty for a musky saffron-forward aroma. As you experiment, you note the shifting balance: more floral in the Middle Kingdom, more resinous in the New Kingdom, and more extravagant in the late period. 3 playful jokes surface DJ Spicer in the house. Mix it, wrap it, love it, and your tune. Stepping away, you notice a mural segment illustrating innovative uses in the Ptolemaic era. Priests spread spiced honey over temple steps to lure ants away from sacred offerings. A quirky tidbit that suggests pest control blended seamlessly with devotion. Mainstream entomologists find ant tunnels diverted by honeyed trails. Yet historians still debate whether this practice was ritualistic or purely pragmatic. At the far end of the hall, a final tableau depicts Roman period embalmers who introduced imported pepper and ginger into Egyptian spice blends, creating a pungent fusion rarely seen in earlier periods. Fringe commentators claim this hybrid cuisine inspired downtrodden workers to hold mock banquets in tomb chambers, though academic consensus indicates these stories likely stem from misinterpreted graffiti passages. Scholars still argue whether Romans truly integrated their culinary spices into funerary contexts or merely left behind scattered jars. As you retrace your steps toward the hall's exit, the olfactory timeline lingers in the air, an interwoven narrative of shifting rituals, evolving blends, and constant adaptation. Each dynasty left its scented fingerprint on the legacy of Egyptian embalming, from the foundational resins of the Old Kingdom to the global spice fusions of the Roman era. Historians still argue whether these changes were driven by necessity theology or sheer showmanship. But you carry their aromatic echoes as you step back into the present. Let the evolving tapestry of spices remind you that even death rituals adapt with time, just like our own traditions today. Keep these shifting scents in mind as you drift towards sleep, a reminder that history never stands still, and neither does the spice rack of eternity. You tread into a hushed gallery of carved reliefs showing long lines of priests, each presenting meticulously cataloged spice jars to solemn overseers. The walls here speak louder than incense hieroglyphs, enumerate every aromatic ingredient needed for a royal burial, listing precise weights and origins. Mainstream Egyptologists confirm that tomb inscriptions often served as checklists, ensuring no vital resin or spice went missing. Yet scholars still argue whether these lists functioned primarily as practical inventories or as symbolic seals guaranteeing the deceased's safe passage. Your gaze drifts to a prominent panel detailing the list of divine scents, which names frankincense from punt myrrh, from punt cinnamon, from the lands of the cedars, cassia from the eastern mountains, and spice of the sacred river, likely dried lotus petals. Next to each entry, small glyphs indicate imperial stockpiles and tribute deliveries, revealing a vast logistical network. Fringe researchers suggest that some local governors forged spice quotas to appear more generous, pocketing the real shipments. Historians still debate whether such corruption was widespread or merely isolated incidents noted in satirical papyri. 3 light jokes weave through your mind. Spice theft, ancient felonies who knew. Bureaucracy smelled so good in tax season, never felt this fragrant. You follow the relief downward to a depiction of embalmers at work jars arrayed on low tables and labeled with the same divine scents in painstaking detail. Each jar's lid features a pictogram of its contents, a tear-shaped blob for myrrh, a papyrus bud for lotus spice, a twisted stick for cinnamon. Mainstream conservators use these pictograms to match residue findings in tombs with historical records, though scholars still argue whether artisans strictly adhered to these guidelines or improvised based on availability and whim. Beside this relief, you notice an actual storage niche embedded in the wall. Its sandstone shelves holding replicas of the original jars. You lift one, its lid, releasing a cloud of warm resinous scent, myrrh mingled with cassia, the mixture thicker and richer than pure resin. Mainstream chemical analyses detect trace compounds indicating that ancient embalmers sometimes blended spices to create signature house scents, akin to modern perfumes. Yet historians still debate whether these blends signified individual embalmers' craftsmanship or were standardized by temple authorities. Moving onward, you encounter a smaller vignette illustrating spice stewardship rituals. 2 officials stand before a scale weighing each brass container of spices against gold rings. Fringe commentators claim this scene depicts a covert spice bank where unneeded aromatics were kept as collateral for temple loans. Scholars still argue whether temples functioned as economic institutions beyond their spiritual roles, or if such accounts are imaginative misreads of symbolic art. 3 gentle zingers emerge. Collateral 1 kilo of cinnamon temple ATM, but make it spicy and loan shark meets chef. A narrow passage leads you past a stone platform where an interactive display allows you to virtually inspect each hieroglyphic label. You tap cassia and learn that cassia's bark was valued for its stronger, more astringent flavor compared to cinnamon. Mainstream texts note its widespread use in embalming and cuisine alike. Yet historians still debate whether cassia's distinct properties offered better preservation or if it simply provided a bolder scent profile for ritual impact. Next, you reach a chamber dedicated to scholarly debates carved into one long wall. Here, 2 groups of hieroglyphic figures argue animatedly. One side champions myrrh's medicinal potency. The other extols frankincense's divine connection. Annotations in smaller script record counterpoints. Frankincense dulls decay but fails to mask odor. Myrrh soothes wounds but lacks ceremonial grandeur. Modern scholars find this depiction astonishing, suggesting that Egyptians documented debates visually, much like commentaries in academic journals. Historians still argue whether these carved debates mirrored real theological councils or served purely didactic purposes for apprentices. 3 playful quips surface academic feuds then and now: pub debates versus papyrus debates, and all the aroma, none of the drama. As you near the end of the gallery, you encounter a final relief depicting the Great Audit of Aromas, an annual ceremony where temple scribes reviewed spice reserves, tested their quality, and redistributed leftovers to local communities as festival offerings. Mainstream records and temple archives mention such audits, but lack detailed descriptions. Scholars still puzzle over whether festival distributions aim to reinforce communal bonds or simply cleared storage for fresh imports. You step before a carved scale, weighing a miniature heap of saffron against a strip of linen, an evocative image of value and sacrifice. 3 light jokes drift past cost of living, ancient edition. Saffron shortage panic, incoming, and when linen becomes luxury currency. Drawing a deep, thoughtful breath, you let the gallery's intricate inventory wash over you. These spice lists and audits reveal a civilization deeply invested in the management of aromas, treating spices not just as luxuries but as assets requiring careful stewardship. Historians still argue whether these practices were pragmatic economics or expressions of divine care. With that, you step toward a final alcove showcasing a single unadorned jar labeled simply Eternity. Its contents unknown, perhaps, a blend never meant for mortal noses. You pause, imagining its whispered secrets. As you drift back down the corridor, you carry the memory of this meticulous register, a testament to an ancient world where every fragrance was accounted for, weighed, and cherished. Let this gallery of spice lists guide your thoughts as you drift toward sleep, reminding you that even in death, organization can be an art form. You find yourself in a hushed laboratory of sorts deep within a modern archaeological institute where stainless steel meets ancient sandstones and the scent of solvents mingles with whispers of times long past. Glass cases display fragments of linen bandages, chunks of resin, and tiny vials of extracted essential oils, remnants of embalming mixtures meticulously sampled from mummy wrappings. Mainstream conservationists confirm that gas chromatography mass spectrometry techniques can isolate volatile compounds like cinnamaldehyde from cinnamon or sesquiterpenes from myrrh, enabling researchers to recreate the exact scent profiles our ancestors once knew. Yet historians still argue whether these lab-engineered aromas truly capture the essence of a 3,000-year-old tomb or simply approximate a modern facsimile. You lean in, peering through a microscope at a slender fiber of linen stained dark by bitumen and frankincense. A lab technician gently transfers a microgram of resinous residue into a sealed vial. In a separate chamber, a nebulizing device disperses trace amounts of reconstructed kai-fi oil into the air, a heady blend of honey wine, cinnamon juniper, and galbanum. The resulting mist hangs in the room like a whispered memory, and you inhale deeply, letting its layered warmth settle behind your eyelids. 3 soft jokes drift through your mind. Perfume sample Eau de Pyramid. This lab's version of Starbucks testing and DIY time machine just adds scent. Nearby, a digital display cycles through chromatograms, each peak representing a different molecular fingerprint: cinnamaldehyde, anethol, thujoin. Mainstream publications note that each compound tells a story of trade, ritual, and technology. Thujoin hints at juniper or cedar, while anethol signals fennel or anise. Yet scholars still debate whether these compounds derive from embalming ingredients or later contamination during excavation and storage. You tap the screen, scrolling through colorful graphs that look more like jazz records than scientific data, every spike a note in an aromatic symphony. On a low table, you spot a small wooden box lined with copper mesh containing clay pellets infused with reconstructed incense blends. A researcher hands you one pellet to crush between your fingers. It fractures like brittle caramel, releasing a swirl of frankincense's piney citrus and myrrh's warm, resinous sweetness. Fringe experimentalists claim that inhaling these pellets triggers dreamlike visions of temple rituals, though mainstream neuroanthropologists caution that any psychoactive effect likely stems from suggestion rather than chemical potency. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians noted such trance states, or if modern labs project romantic notions onto dusty fragments. You drift past a workstation where a volunteer delicately applies droplets of reconstructed lotus oil onto a linen swatch. The pale yellow droplets bead on the fabric, their aroma soft and aquatic, like a river at dawn after a storm. Mainstream botanists affirm that Nymphaea lotus's floral compounds degrade over millennia, yet minute traces persist, allowing modern labs to recover a ghostly echo of the flower's scent. Scholars still debate whether lotus featured in embalming for its mild analgesic properties or as an emblem of rebirth, symbolically renewing the deceased. 3 gentle jokes float by, now serving lavender lotus lounge. Wake me up when the Nile blooms and future spas will be jealous. In one corner, a battered leather-bound notebook lies open its pages, filled with scribbled notes from early 20th century Egyptologists who performed the first attempts at smell reconstruction. One entry reads, "Mixed equal parts myrrh and castor oil. Results pungent, but approximates tomb odor." Fringe historians adore these anecdotal records, suggesting that these pioneers unknowingly pioneered scent archaeology. Yet mainstream academics often dismiss the early methods as crude, noting that modern instrumentation offers far greater precision, though they still argue whether even the best technology can truly resurrect ancient smells. You wander into a dimly lit smell chamber where 5 sealed pods release distinct odors in timed intervals. Behind a glass partition, subjects don headphones, playing ambient Nile sounds, and close their eyes as each scent wafts around them. The first emits natron salt dryness, the second, honeyed cinnamon warmth, the third, smoky frankincense, the fourth, herbal coriander dill, the last, resinous bitumen. Volunteers scribble dream journals. One dreams of drifting through papyrus reeds, another sees a procession of jackal-headed deities. Fringe psychologists argue these outcomes prove sense can unlock collective memory, while mainstream thinkers insist the dreams reflect individual associations, not ancient scenarios. Historians still debate whether such guided smell experiences offer genuine windows into past perceptions or mirror modern imagination. You exit the chamber and spot a researcher preparing a 3D printed model of a canopic jar lid. Its surface is coated with layers of reconstructed resin, blends mimicking the original's texture and smell. Mainstream conservators use these models for hands-on education, allowing museum visitors to handle replica artifacts without risking damage to real relics. Yet scholars still argue whether the scent-coated replicas distract from authentic learning or enrich understanding by engaging multiple senses. You pick up the lid and sniff it. Ghostly cedar and cinnamon envelopes your mind, conjuring images of the duat. 3 light jokes surface. Bring your own sniff jar. Who needs audio guides and multi-pass sniff edition? A glass door leads into a special climate-controlled vault, housing actual linen wrappings and resin-coated bandages. The air is kept cool and dry to slow chemical decay, yet you notice a faint residual scent, a faint echo of cinnamon and myrrh that seems baked into the walls. Mainstream studies indicate that museum environments struggle to eliminate all volatile traces, leading to perfume contamination over decades. Scholars still argue whether these trace scents help or hinder conservation, serving as fragile links to the past or confusing overlays that blur provenance. You close your eyes, letting that residual fragrance settle, part memory, part artifact. In a quiet alcove, you find a row of glass cylinders containing living cultures of microbes, once isolated from tomb environments. Each cylinder smells slightly different. Some moldy, some briny, some faintly floral, reminding you that decay and aroma are inseparable partners. Mainstream microbiologists study these cultures to understand how embalming spices inhibited harmful bacteria. Yet historians still debate whether Egyptians intentionally targeted microbes or simply observed unexpected benefits. You lean close, inhaling the subtle mix of science and history in every swirl. 3 soft zingers emerge lab tours now, with mold scent option science sniff fairs. And when microbiology meets perfumery, you drift toward a final exhibit, an interactive olfactory map projecting Egypt's trade routes onto a floor grid. Each path glows as you step on it, and overhead dispensers release snippets of related spice scents: cinnamon at sea roots, bitumen at desert oases, cedar along Mediterranean shores. Mainstream geographers applaud this multisensory tool for teaching trade dynamics, while scholars still debate whether scent maps risk oversimplifying complex economic networks. You step along the glowing trails, letting each aroma guide your feet and mind across ancient landscapes. As you leave the labs behind, the curator's voice whispers in your ear, "Smell is memory's shadow." You carry that thought with you as you step back into the softly lit museum corridor, beyond where the scent of polished wood and faint dust lingers, mingled with traces of reconstructed kaifi and ancient resin. Modern archaeology may never perfectly replicate the aromas that once permeated tombs and temples, but these scientific endeavors stitch sensory threads across millennia. Historians still debate whether smell reconstruction opens authentic portals to the past or merely crafts beautiful illusions. You breathe out slowly, letting the mixed fragrances settle in your lungs, and realize that you've inhaled both science and mystery, knowledge and speculation entwined like 2 entwined vines of cedar and myrrh. 3 gentle jokes float in your thoughts. Scent time travel. Batteries not included. Future historians. Remember the 2025 Aroma Lab. And next exhibit, virtual taste testing. With that, you step out of the lab's threshold, cradling each scent memory as if it were a fragile relic. Let their ghostly echoes guide your dreams, where every breath may carry whispers of ancient spice-laden sands. You stand at the mouth of the grand burial chamber, the final threshold between fragrant ceremony and silent eternity. Cinnamon's sweet warmth mingles with myrrh's resinous embrace, while a soft veil of frankincense smoke drifts across the polished stone floor like a mellow river at dusk. In this moment, spices perform their ultimate duty, bidding you farewell with a sensory lullaby. Mainstream archaeologists confirm that embalmers often deposited a final blend of crushed lotus petals and spiced oils at the tomb entrance to honor the deceased's journey, leaving a last aromatic guidepost for the soul. Historians still argue whether this farewell fragrance served more as a practical insect barrier or as a sacred blessing invoking protective deities. You inhale deeply, tasting a faint echo of cinnamon. It's cinnamaldehyde molecules known to produce calming effects on the nervous system. Fringe lore whispers that some high priests included a pinch of crushed poppy husks in this blend, hoping to gift the departed with restful dreams before crossing into the duat. Whether these traces ever reached beyond anecdotal shreds and obscure scrolls remains contested, yet the idea of a final soporific spice seems fitting for a sweet send-off. As you take your first steps into the shadowed chamber, resin-coated walls catch torchlight and pulse with amber glow. You brush a finger along a low ledge, feeling residual resin that still gleams like petrified honey. 3 soft jokes meander through your mind. Free aromatherapy, courtesy of the afterlife. No snooze button here, just spice-induced drift-off and Pharaoh's nightcap, one last sip of scented slumber. Ahead, the sarcophagus lid rests open, revealing the polished mask within its features, faintly illuminated by swirling incense smoke. Before you lies a small alabaster bowl marked Farewell Blend, rimmed with crushed cassia bark and cedar powder. You scoop a handful and gently scatter it across the sarcophagus threshold, each particle a tiny fragrant beacon, guiding the soul onward. Mainstream conservators note that cassia's stronger antimicrobial properties may have offered a final protective edge, sealing the body's defenses. Yet scholars still debate whether cassia's use at this stage was pragmatic preservation or purely symbolic homage to the sun's rebirth. Soft drafts from the inner chamber carry a hint of lotus-tinged water pooled near the foot of the bier. The lotus's floral notes, gentle, aquatic, and calm, act as the final undercurrent beneath the heavier spice undertones. Fringe botanical treatises claim that lotus extract's trace alkaloids imparted mild analgesia, providing comfort even after death. Historians still argue whether lotus served a practical sedative role, or if its potency existed only in poetic metaphor. Every step deeper into the chamber muffles your footsteps, and you become acutely aware of the sound of your own breathing. Preserve that hushed cadence, because here the spices speak loudest. Clove-laced shadows flicker on the walls. Cinnamon warmth coils in the corners, and frankincense plumes swirl overhead like gentle spirits. 3 gentle quips float by. Ghosts probably rated this aroma a solid 5 stars. If only bedtime stories smelled this good. And no lavender needed spice it to sleep. You reach the innermost sanctum, where the mummified form lies draped in resin-soaked linens. You kneel, placing both hands on the cool stone floor, and offer a final silent thanks to the embalmers, who transform these spices into sacred passageways. This is the culmination of a millennia of practice, spices distilled into symbols, rituals woven into aromatic tapestries, and the scent of eternity infused into every grain of sand. Turning to leave, you glance back as a faint glow of torchlight catches a stray cinnamon bark curl among the bandages. The scene holds you for a heartbeat, an eternal snapshot where fragrance, faith, and farewell intertwine. Let that memory settle just as these spices settle around you, forming an invisible cloak of comfort and closure. The torches in the corridor dim further, their golden flames flickering like lazy fireflies drifting toward rest. You glide forward on soft footsteps, each one softer than the last, the scented air growing lighter as cinnamon and frankincense depart, leaving only the faintest whisper of resin and lotus. Your breathing slows, matching the gentle rhythm of a lullaby. You can almost hear in your mind an echo of embalmers' chants, long silenced. Imagine the cool stone beneath your palms as you lean against a column, closing your eyes to the world's weight. A tender breeze carries a last delicate trace of spice, brushing your cheeks like a lover's fingertip. Feel the K of cassia's sweetness melt into lotus's cool balm, and let the two entwine into a single serene caress. Soft shadows stretch across walls, and the distant sound of sand shifting underfoot reminds you of desert nights where silent dunes cradle the moon. You tug your linen cloak snugly around your shoulders, its coarse fibers wrapped in memories of clove and cedar. Each breath you take draws in calm, and each exhale releases a sliver of tension. No hurry remains. Time itself seems to unwind. The world beyond this corridor recedes to a gentle murmur, a faint undercurrent of civilization that fades like an ebbing tide. Here only your quiet heartbeat and the lingering aroma of ancient spices remain, guiding your thoughts toward peaceful oblivion. As the final torch gutter fades, you feel a warm emptiness, a soft space where dreams gather to cradle your mind. Trust the spices' parting song to carry you across the threshold of sleep. Allow their ghostly echoes to paint your slumber with echoes of myrrh, cinnamon, and lotus. Drift now, carried on a fragrant breeze, into realms uncharted, where history's whisper and slumber reigns supreme.